Start the webinar.
I am testing negative for anyone who's curious. I'm just masking.
We do.
It's like
Just thank you.
Just
enough.
And a bonus. We have a quorum plus one, so we're good.
Spare.
That's fair. That's fair.
January 6th.
Okay, it is 7:01.
I can always go home.
No. Happy New Year and welcome to the January 3rd, 2022. Oh no, 2023. I already wrote it on the check wrong. Meeting of the Westford School Committee. Welcome. And we will start with, as we always do, with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledges to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I was chuckling, Gloria, because I was watching you wrestle with your purse in the chair as it tried to take you down.
Under the wire. That's how I'm starting the new year.
You're still great.
Independent playwright.
First, next item is consent agenda. We've got the warrant in the packet, and that is all that's on the consent agenda.
It says meeting minutes.
I'm sorry, meeting minutes, also in the packet.
Yep. Oh, sorry. Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, any questions on that? All right, call for the vote. All in favor? That passes 6-0. Next up is public comment. I'll check on Zoom if there's anybody for public comment. We have no attendees on Zoom. I don't think I see anybody here in the room. And so, unless somebody walks in or pops in on Zoom, I think we're going to move on to our informational updates, starting with superintendent and assistant superintendent updates.
Well, Happy New Year,
Happy New
everyone.
Year.
I wish everybody a Happy New Year. I hope everybody was able to enjoy the break that they needed, whatever that is. I hope that's what they were able to get. The only update that we have is I know that and some of you might have gotten some questions about this as well too, I'm not sure, but we have had a recent staffing concern at the Miller School in the cafeteria, which has meant that they've needed to make some adjustments to the lunches for a specific period of time. And I know that there were some people who had some concerns about that. I had some parents reach out to me. I know Colleen Wallace is working with the kitchen there to see if how they can best mitigate that over the length of time. But the reality is that they will continue to deliver food that meets all of the federal requirements. It's not necessarily going to be to the wonderful standard and desire that I think it normally is, but it's because there are very specific limitations at this moment in time. We have a significant number of students who have allergies. That also complicates sort of the variety that temporary employees might be able to provide. So I just wanted to share with everybody that we do realize that this is not ideal. I know Principal Boylan and Colleen Wallace are working very hard to see if they can shorten that length, but the kids will continue to be getting nutritious meals. It might not meet the same joy that it typically does, but I know that they're working hard to do that. So I just, as far as the district's concerned, we understand the concern, but it is in many ways it's a situation out of our control. And I think what they're trying to do to make sure that meals are available is great. It's not as great as the meals as they were, and the great meals will return. So that's really it for the updates that we have. Do you have any?
I just want to
additional
echo
updates?
Happy New Year to everybody, and I won't break out into song, but happy birthday to Dr. Chu today.
Really?
Yeah, it is. We managed to not have this meeting last year because we didn't think there was a point for a meeting, which was it was a bigger deal last year. I will say last year was a little bit more of a milestone.
Raise a cake.
And so this year was like, it's another birthday.
Yeah, 26. 25. 25.
Right, 25 was a
Big
big deal.
deal,
That's
yeah.
right, 26, like, nobody cares. Yeah.
We've got a 25th birthday happening in my household tonight.
Really? Oh, really?
So, yeah,
Okay.
so
Happy
birthday
birthday,
twins.
yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. Oh, that is a big deal.
And that's for real.
Yeah.
Sorry, anything else? Any anniversaries that we're, interrupting tonight? Or what other celebrations did we completely ruin by having this meeting? Well, thanks for the update on Miller. I know you've been good about communicating that to the community, and we look forward to getting that shaped up down the line. Any school committee updates? I'm going to start with one, which is just a point of clarification because there was some confusion that we realized that at the last meeting, so we are required to hold a formal budget hearing before our budget goes to town meeting. And so we have all of our meetings and we talk about the budget, but there has to be one formal budget meeting that actually gets put in the newspaper in the Lowell Sun so that the public, because the public's reading the Lowell Sun every day and looking at whatever page that's on, but we're required to do that. And I had last time said, because we've changed how we've done it this year, we changed our policy, we've changed our practice. I had said that we would be doing the budget hearing at our next meeting on the 17th, but we actually had placed the ad saying that we would do it at this meeting on the 3rd. Now, for all intents and purposes, we can do that sort of when we want. I mean, we're not beholden to a certain time. We want to do it before we take the vote on the budget as a committee. But we will be doing it on the 17th. I believe we did issue a subsequent correction notice in the Sun. And so just if anybody, this would be going out to anybody who saw that in the Sun, didn't see our last meeting. So that overlap of people who that might include just apologies and clarification.
Of which, well, we've got 5 viewers.
Yeah, so it could be those people. We will be doing that budget hearing on the 17th. And that's just an opportunity for the public to come and voice their thoughts on the Westford Public School budget for fiscal year 2024. That's all I had. Anything else from the committee as the way of updates?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't think. I mean, literally the last thing we did before the holidays was have a meeting and then a few days of school and work and then 10 days off. And so I know I didn't expect a lot. Students, any updates?
We originally started by saying, "Oh, there's not much," but we have.
What do you think about it?
We have a couple stuff. So one, I think foremost is most important, it's most important is that midterms are coming up in, I believe, the 3rd week of January. The schedule's already been released, so parents should have that available. And we're reverting back to my freshman year schedule. So we have like the half day, 2 midterms a day. So we have that going on. And fun fact for parents is that the library this year has opened it back up to like students to be able to stay till 10 p.m. for some set dates to study for midterms. And they've opened up some more spaces for us to study as well. And they'll be providing food and stuff like that. So if any parents wanted to be aware of that.
That's the Fletcher Library, just so
Yes,
people
the
know.
JV Fletcher Library. That's really sweet of them to do that. And so, I just came from the library. So, another thing is we are having advisory tomorrow. I believe the juniors are getting the whole college talk or the beginning of that process, Common App, stuff like that. So that's important if you want to talk to your juniors tomorrow. And then also, in general, seniors are sending out their last round of college apps, so I thought we could, highlight that. After January, they should be done being sent out, so it'll relieve the pressure a little bit.
Yeah. And then I guess going off of that career exploration type of thing, so the juniors have the career exploration breakfast, which is on January 11th. So in that, basically, different career professionals come into WA in the morning on the 11th, and juniors are able to like go around to whichever one they want and kind of listen to what a career in that field looks like. And I believe guidance is looking for speakers, or they have a list of speakers, but they're looking for more. So if any parents are interested, they can reach out to guidance. And then I guess the other thing is that the playwriting lab is doing their second iteration of their plays, their 10-minute plays, on January 5th and 6th at 7 p.m. And those plays are written, directed, and produced by the students in the playwriting class. So it's really cool.
Yeah. Oh, and the last thing is that, in case anyone wants to know, that WA is putting on Mean Girls for their spring production. So we thought that was kind of exciting.
Great.
That's fun. Yeah. That sounds super fun.
Thank you. Good stuff.
Do you remember, I'm trying to remember how many years ago it was. Again, this was one of those things that was pre-pandemic, right? But I don't remember if it was part of our Challenge Success work or if it was just following that, but we had an evening we had a panel discussion for parents and for students, really about sort of alternative pathways, right? So like everybody on the panel had they had found themselves in their careers in ways that they would not have imagined. I think that might be a good thing for us to kind of do again, you know? Like it was a wide range. There were authors, there were people who were doing things, they had gone into education but they hadn't started in education. There were just different I can't even remember all the different things that were there, but it was just an interesting thing that kind of really, because we talk about the college planning process, and we know that one of our really big thoughts is kind of like focusing on the right fit, right? So that people can really figure out where they would be happiest going to school. But one of those things is that notion of having the career day for juniors is fantastic. But are we also reminding people that a lot of us don't know what we want to do until we're doing it? You know what I mean? And so like reminding students that there's multiple ways to get or to find yourself, I guess. I don't even know what but do you remember? How long ago?
And that crop of students and families that it was targeting now have already chosen their
Right,
path because they've
right,
graduated through.
right.
So
Yeah.
the people who it would
We still
impact
have
now.
So I helped organize that.
Right,
and
I
you
moderated
were,
it,
you
yeah.
emceed it. We still have people who wanted to speak, and we were sort of full. So we already have. I mean, I still have names of people that were interested, that also had interesting paths in the story. So I think if there was some interest in doing that again, we could definitely try to do.
What are your thoughts
do
about
something
that?
along-
I think that'd be a really good idea. I think it's also interesting because during application timing for the juniors aren't going to expect this, but that whole like idea of understanding what your future is going to look like is actually quite important, because a lot of these apps are asking you, how do you envision your life after college? Which is like, that's crazy to like ask
That's a lot.
18-year-old students in high school, but with those types of stuff, they can be equipped at least a little better about how to explain maybe how they see their future, or maybe how to explain how they don't know how life is going to turn out.
Right.
So those could be really important.
I think also it'll be helpful for students who aren't looking at college as like the next alternative, if
Right.
there are other like trades and things that come in. So it'll be helpful to kind of make sure you're catering to like the entire school versus like just the majority.
Right.
To like kind of also even people who might be like kind of on the fence, it'll be like good to get contact in the field here. If you have any questions, you can just like reach out to, because they're like a trusted individual who is successful in that field, and like kind of figure out the career path and like what you need to do to get there.
That is sort of the way that I think we had even reached out to find. It was like basically like reaching out to people who would like to help tell their story, right? Like how they got to where they are. So that you're right. There were a lot of different things going on.
I was gonna, I'm gonna get impeached, but I'm just gonna say it anyway. There's also an opportunity to do a panel on like normalizing the gap year, which is like, there's like one of my daughters did city year, for example.
Oh, excellent.
And so she did city year, and that could be like something that folks can talk about, or like other things, because that helped her then think about, city year is a lot of the placements are in classrooms, and she ended up going into teaching after. But what I'm saying is like there's other types of things to think about between high school and college if you're not ready to do like a traditional 4-year school or what have you.
That's great. I think one of
Which
the
is
people-
something great to say. It is not something that should get you.
Yeah, no, I was going to say. But I was waiting for the impeachable events, but yeah.
What did you say?
I think we had somebody who had maybe traveled abroad for
Yeah.
a year or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah,
on the
I have
panel.
a friend who, she used to be pretty high up at City Year. I don't know if she still is or she would be willing to come. And I know City Year is also looking at kids like a little bit older, but my daughter went in at 18.
Right.
Yeah,
My oldest daughter.
yeah, interesting. That's great.
Well, I'll also say that I think that the school doesn't necessarily advertise, but they do have a lot of like different opportunities available for how your high school experience itself will look that will shape, life after high school, right? For instance, like the dual enrollment classes for someone who wants to understand how college works within a profession they're looking
Yeah.
at. Maybe they'll test it out. Maybe they don't like that class, but at least they've taken it and understood that now. Or for instance, I believe there are travel abroad options. Like if you work it out with the school and the counselor, like there are all these options available, but like I think students are not aware of it. But I think it could be very helpful, or for students who don't necessarily want to be at WA, and dual enrollment's perfect for them, so I think there's lots of options that they could be made aware of.
I think it's really hard to find information on dual enrollment.
Yeah.
So my daughter Jamie did do it, and so she earned enough credits to
Right.
be a sophomore when she went to UVM, and so I think that there should be more discussion about it.
Yeah.
Good food for thought. Thank you. Any other updates? Okay, great. So we'll go into the first item under business, which is the FY24 budget.
So I want to thank, we've been able to get some questions in advance, which I think has been helpful. What do we, you
Just gonna turn the mic.
microphone? Oh, thank you.
Oh, look at that.
Nick's doing it. Look at that. Thank you, Nick.
Much more qualified.
Right.
than
You
what
would
I
have done
was-
an excellent job.
I don't know.
I think you would have been able to do a great job. So our plan is that the school committee members have been able to sort of share some initial questions via Airtable, which you've been able to share with us. So in some cases, we've been able to get some information so that we can answer questions. Our goal is that on the 17th, we will share that list of questions and all of those answers specifically in the packet for, I think, for everybody to see as well, too. So I want to thank you for sharing those questions with us. It's a very similar process that we also end up going through with the FinCom as well, too. So the FinCom will also kind of share questions with us in advance so that we can be prepared to talk about them. I was able to have a couple of other conversations with our town partners, and so I know one of the questions that we have is just this, the differential that exists between the proposed budget and then the 2.5 allocation that the town has, which is 266,180. Thank you. I knew Jenny would have that last number. Thank you very much. And so one of the things that we've talked about is that when we shared that information, it was not an alarming reaction from the town manager and from director of finance in terms of knowing that it was a discrepancy, but it wasn't an alarming reaction because I do know that there's still room for, if the select board makes certain decisions with the ARPA funding that might, if there are things that are in capital that they choose to fund with ARPA, that could change some of the operational funds that are available. So that's one of the things that we know still exists. Plus, we're going to have more information about the state aid on March 1st. And there's still, we're optimistic that this isn't necessarily a concern. So that's why I'm continuing to recommend the budget as presented to you, knowing that there's going to be multiple conversations that will continue happening with that. With that, and with I've shared with you the current responses to some of the questions. I didn't know if there were discussions, if people had additional questions. We are happy to answer questions that we think that we can answer, and we're happy to also say, we'll get you that answer for the next meeting if we feel like we're not necessarily able to answer that. But with that, I was just gonna entertain discussion.
So I do, Chris. Do we have any further updates on that? The 14% increase for out of district tuitions.
I do not have specific information as to whether or not, if that is existing in the budget yet, right? Because that's where that's at, is that it was approved or was recommended by,
OSD.
I was gonna say OCD. It's not OCD.
There's
it's
too many
OSD.
acronyms in this state. Yeah.
But I haven't seen how that's played out.
Okay.
I don't know if any of the schools that we already have relationships with, the private schools specifically, if they would increase theirs to 14%, or if they would come somewhere in the middle. We just don't know. What I do know is, and I'd shared this at the last meeting, is that the Commissioner Riley is talking about trying to establish what he called a pothole fund, or, the idea being that knowing that this is a potential massive
Foreseeable.
change.
It's a foreseeable change.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so have we played that out financially? Like, if we are hit by a 14% increase, what type of delta that would look like?
Oh, yes, we do
Okay.
know. We know that if we're hit, if all of the, if everything was to happen, right?
Yeah.
So if all of the schools that we have students at currently increased to 14%, and there was an increase in our collaboratives as well too, which is different because we're members of the Valley Collaborative, which is not one of these private schools. But if they were to increase, the total combination was like $516,000.
519.
19?
Yes.
519.
Thank God Jenny's here.
So that's
So we
worst
know-
case scenario.
That's worst case scenario. And I shared that with the town manager and with the director of finance specifically, in saying that I did not think it was responsible for us to budget that, knowing that it's such a variable, that's something that we should be talking about outside of the FY24 budget. So if that was to come to fruition, then I think we would be talking with people about, okay, well then what do we need to do in order to meet that? But since we don't know, I wouldn't want to budget or ask, or basically in our scenario, we would be looking to cut things only because that might happen. And I don't think that that's the best way to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and presumably every town in the state is
It will
going
have
to
the
be in
exact same scenario.
exact position.
That's
So
right.
one would think the legislature would have some plan for how this would be.
Right.
You would hope.
I mean,
And so we're saying, I
we're
mean, like,
used to unfunded mandates, but this is on a slightly different scale.
This is different.
So.
That's right.
Yeah, one would think there would be
I
some
mean, I-
statewide way of addressing it.
That's.
I would hope.
One would hope.
I would
Maybe
hope.
not.
You would
I
hope.
said hope.
Yeah.
There's
Oh.
a new administration. We don't even know if
Right.
Riley's going to keep his job. Like, I think.
No,
that
he's
they're-
not.
Well,
Because, like,
what I
the
know is
regional
what we've
education
reached out to
secretary-
we've reached out to our legislators. We've made it very clear. We've shared what the impact will be to us. We've shared our concern with that, and I just feel like I feel like it's such a variable and it's such an unknown that it should be a separate conversation from the FY24 budget.
So then the number that's in there doesn't include that gap.
That is correct. Yes.
That was a good question, Sean.
Yeah. So, Dr. Chu, I think you already mentioned the difference, $266,000, and then it's not a concern for the town manager or finance director at this moment. But do we know how much will be covered? Is it going to be the full amount, half amount, or what? Do we know? So we can actually at least do some planning. Do we know? Even know?
No, not specifically. I can't say specifically. What I do know is that I feel like in the conversations because we know that we're still gonna have a round of conversations with the select board and the finance committee as well too. Knowing that some of it is also going to be dependent on the March 1st release of state aid. And we're gonna have a quick turnaround before we need to put the entire finance book together for town meeting. That will be a very, that would be a very quick turnaround in terms of looking to see what adjustments need to be made. But this was not such a discrepancy that it was causing alarm.
So you don't think that there needs to have a plan to actually to know, like, if that cover the entire difference, then what we need to do?
I don't think so at this point.
Okay. Thank you.
And if that were to change, then it's something that
Yeah.
you would charge the superintendent to come back and figure out how to close that gap from within at that point. And then even though that's post-vote, it's something that could be revisited given this additional different information at that time.
Yep. Yep. As long as you're comfortable at this moment.
I am.
But it does put us in a slightly unusual situation where we're carrying forward this budget that has this discrepancy and looking towards the 17th for a vote. And traditionally, we haven't voted,
Yeah.
something that doesn't match. I don't think we ever have. I mean, not in the past 8 years, we haven't. And so it'll probably be important to have those conversations, to continue to have the conversations with the town partners, to just make sure the understanding is there about this, understand the process past the 17th into March, because you're right, it becomes an ongoing process, given that March 1st, we're gonna get more information, and that'll give us 3 weeks. There'll be budget hearings on the town side. We've traditionally, in the past few years at least, done a joint FinCom, Select Board, School Committee meeting to look at budget, especially when things have been difficult, so thinking about when that sort of thing might happen. And so I think we'll, probably in the next week, have more of these conversations and have a better idea of, make sure everybody's on the same page from
Yeah.
the town and school side. I think.
Because like before the town meeting, the budget has to be balanced. Otherwise, the town tax rate or budget cannot be certified by the state.
Right.
So like sometime between like March 1st to like whatever the town meeting date is, that needs to actually be resolved.
Right.
January 19th is that meeting with the finance committee.
We have that scheduled?
Yeah, it's the
Yeah, I've
first.
already forgotten that it's.
And there's a
February
follow-up
2nd.
scheduled for February 2nd.
Okay. So those will be key. I mean, again, we will, in theory, already have approved the budget on the 17th. But as long as there's understanding on everybody's part that the process continues after that to really figure out what's gonna happen there, I think we'll be okay. Other budget questions? Ask something about that.
Yeah, I've been thinking about like whether our budget process has sort of evolved over the last couple of years, right? And I've been thinking about how it feels like usually I think historically the discussions have focused on when there have been consequences, right? Like when there are painful cuts or choices to be made, that's what these meetings tend to focus on, right?
Yep.
And if we're in a place where that isn't the norm or isn't happening, then it sort of feels like anticlimactic, right? And so I'm almost just thinking about like how to further evolve our budget review so that it feels more substantial without those painful discussions, right? So like in a sort of a rollover year or something, what would that look like? I don't have an answer to that. I don't know how other districts really do it. And I was trying to think about why I'm not used to that in my 3-year term. And because I think it's because when the big cuts have been the focus, we don't sort of get into some of the weeds in these public meetings. We've always done, offline questions and shared that and stuff like that. But the meeting discussions have always been about the pain, right? And so absent that, what kind of things make sense for us to talk about or to plan, right? I don't know. It's kind of an open question.
I do think, but and in that vein, I think the conversations that we're having, even at the subcommittee
Yeah.
level, right? Like the conversations that we started to have about fees, the conversations that we're going to have about revolving accounts, things like
Yeah.
that. Knowing that those things are happening,
Right.
I think in a very good way makes this a little bit less.
Exactly.
And it makes it anticlimactic, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
then there's a little bit more of just an ongoing understanding, like, well, yeah, that makes sense, and we are looking at everything, and we know that people are looking at it responsibly,
Yep.
and that there is a very specific need associated with any ask that exists. So I feel like it is a little bit of a transition, because what we did last year and what we're trying to do this year, even more so with those conversations, I think is really going to kind of help us moving forward. And then there will still be times, we're in this strange, I feel like this is a little bit different because we are also in the midst of the feasibility study. And so the information that's coming out of the feasibility study, it's going to give us a lot of different things that are going to have very specific price tags, right? Whether the price tags at this moment in time are specific or not, they will be significant on one level, right? We know that there's going to have to be work done on some of our buildings. We know that there's going to be things that we're going to be looking at in terms of whether or not we need to reconfigure the grades at buildings, whether that can help us move towards the commitment that the school committee has already expressed about, examining school start times. Things like that are also going to have financial impacts. And so we're at a point right now where we might be like, okay, we know what all of this is.
Right.
We now see that in many ways we have made some reductions because, again, our enrollment is, in order to, adjust for the enrollment, we are still reducing positions for next year. We are able to maintain level services, though. And so then we might be able to say, okay, well, as we get the information back from the feasibility study, which will be this spring, it'll be after we've established the FY24 budget, but that will have a very specific, I think, impact on the FY25 discussion. Yeah.
Yep.
You made a couple points. I mean, I think there were two main points I took away from what you said, which were the two things I was thinking of. One is this idea, and you couched it with the feasibility study, is like investing. Like we talk a lot about maintenance and preventative maintenance,
Yep.
and the feasibility study is akin to that, right? It's sort of
Yes.
looking at what do we have, what are our assets, and how are we taking care of them, and how do we want to invest in the future. So I think thinking about how we invest long term in physical assets, but also programs,
Right.
and I think full day kindergarten is a great example of where we took there is a budget impact to that, but we knew that's something we wanted to invest in. And then the other point you made, talking about the subcommittees, I think is that we have evolved this to be more of a full year process.
Right.
The full day kindergarten discussion, it did not just live in the budget, timeline last year. It's an ongoing conversation. And I think we're seeing more of that. Like we're thinking about these things all year long, and hopefully it continues to make the budget
Yeah.
process anticlimactic. I suspect it won't always, but this year it certainly feels that way. Yeah.
So yeah, I think last year and this year the budget probably is still in a transition period. As Dr. Chu said that budget should reflect the school committees and the superintendent vision and strategy about where the school district is going, and then without that strategy, it's really hard to actually redirect resources to the places where we want to go. So like when we have the feasibility study coming out, that's going to actually have some dramatic changes probably regarding where we are going to do for the next year's budget. But like last year and this year, I really think they are just transition period.
For this year, I appreciate the kind of organization of the process where we are able to go through and ask the online questions through the Airtable, because a lot of those, and I put some of those in, are very detailed line item questions that I think just aren't as necessary to voice in a meeting, and are actually, I was able to more thoroughly go through the budget and do what I felt like was our due diligence on that, and ask those line item questions in a written form. And I like that is now paralleling the process that we've gone through in the past with FinCom. So I think we're able to do our own due diligence on this budget. But I mean, I think there is some recognition that this budget process feels differently this year, and why. And I just want to step back and recognize that let's not undersell how awesome it is and how much work went into making a budget that is fiscally responsible and allows us to maintain our level services with a 2.5,
Yeah.
because that hasn't always been possible in the past. And I'm guessing there's a lot of work that went through with the numbers to make that possible and to make all of that work. So
Our
let's-
request is 2.9.
Yeah.
Like, I need to clarify that quickly, because you said that.
Thanks
The
for putting in
allocation is
that asterisk.
2.5, our request is currently 2.9.
But it's not an easy task,
Right, thank
especially in this day and age. And I know we have some enrollment declines and some adjustments that have helped with that, but there's a lot of work that has gone on behind the scenes to make that possible. So-
And some decisions that I think were made last year
Mhm.
in the budget that have carryover benefits to this
Yeah.
year. I think
Yeah.
that's a factor as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I didn't hope my reflection doesn't imply that we're not doing our due diligence,
No, not
because
at
I
all.
think that
No, I
it's
think
definitely
it's a good-
happening,
yeah, I
and
think
the
it's a good-
finance subcommittees, doing a great job. But I guess what I meant was, for someone that watches these meetings, it may feel like, okay, budget's on your agenda, and, it's kind of light, right? And so I guess maybe we need to think about how we capture some of those offline things that are happening, or the finance subcommittee things, which are public meetings, but are during the day, so I understand that's challenging, to this type of topic.
Mhm.
Does that make sense? That's all.
Well, and I will say, I think there's also, historically, there's been a question as to, well, why don't you just ask for more, right? Like, I feel like that's kind of been a thing, and I feel like last year we addressed that. We talked about, knowing what we did know was available, and we made very specific adjustments, and we were able to be met halfway when we had, when there was a discrepancy. And in this same thing, it reminds us that we are talking about what we think is a responsible, use of the resources that we have. And it is requesting, making sure that it's clear that we are identifying the needs, and that we're able to articulate that and say that we understand that, that it's not limitless, but we're in, I think we have a good, healthy conversation going on with both what we do with town manager and director of finance, and I feel like the collective conversations we'll have with select board and the FinCom, I think will be helpful for everybody to understand each other's perspectives and see this is what we need to support what I think is, a massive strength of the town, which is the school system.
I think there's also been an evolution that, Westford schools at Westford as a town went through a huge, period of growth, and then leveled off, and now our school population has started to decline. And I think when that decline first started, it wasn't something Westford was used to, and it wasn't, so the idea that there were staff reductions was very alarming. And I think that now that has happened a number of years in a row, I think people have heard the message of, this is not a cause for alarm. We are right-sizing our staff to service the students that we have in our buildings, and this is the fiscally responsible choice. So I don't think it's causing the same type of alarm. I think these same types of changes that we're implementing this year, a few years ago, we would be seeing very different reactions in our email inboxes a few years ago, and there would have been much more alarm of like, wait, why are these changes happening? I think that I think people have gotten the message and are less alarmed by it now. So I think these are just fiscally responsible changes.
Other thoughts, questions?
No, but, sorry, I do have one. I interrupted myself. If, as part of that evolution, if any of the members have a particular suggestion for what finance subcommittee should look like, I mean, please feel free to just send that our way. Just an open book of what, always open to sort of suggestions and evolving that, so.
And as a reminder to everybody, it is the three of you on
Yes.
the subcommittee as
Yep.
your budget buddies.
Yep.
Right, so we had talked about budget buddies last year.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think it's been really effective these past 2 years. I mean, I think it's been huge to this process, having a really, very functional
Yes.
budget subcommittee, finance subcommittee, meeting regularly. So thank you. Thank you, subcommittee. All right. Well, I think that wraps up that discussion for this week. And we look forward to a finale on the 17th on the FY24 budget. Next on the agenda is the policy subcommittee with our new policy. Thank you, Jenny.
Hey, Jenny.
P6205, second reading and vote tonight.
Before we even start, I'll do the procedural thing because I always forget. Motion to waive the second reading of policy P6205.
Second.
All in favor of waiving the second reading?
I actually had to restrain the urge to be like, to say all in favor, and then I was like, wait, no, that's not my job. It's Chris's job. Gosh. So Catherine and I met right before the holidays. The public comment period had closed. We did not receive any public comment on this new and updated version from the previous one we'd done earlier in the fall. We hadn't received anything further from leadership. I think this one covered all our bases on confining it just to this particular case of public virtual school students. Our process for homeschool students is unchanged. And it also kind of leaves us some flexibility going forward if the number of, we know there are currently 2 public virtual schools in Massachusetts. If that changes going forward, we've left some flexibility. We've also taken into account that our extracurriculars is something that we're in full control over, but we're not necessarily in control of governing bodies like the MIAA or DECA or any other outside body that our students might engage in outside competitions. So we've taken that into account, and we've just left some flexibility there. So again, if there's evolution with the MIAA and what their requirements are, we can have our programs evolve as well. We just in no way want to put any additional barriers in place to participation. So I think we've got all our bases covered, and policy met, and is presented to you in the packet unchanged. And it's ready for a vote, in case anyone has any questions.
Do we have any questions?
No.
I think we've had a lot of opportunities to talk about this,
Right.
and appreciate the policy subcommittee's persistence on this one and bringing it to this point. It does seem like something that will serve us for a while, I would anticipate.
Well, then I will hope that we can look forward to welcoming some additional students to join our extracurriculars. And we'll make a motion to approve P6205, Public Virtual School Student Participation in Extracurricular Activities.
Second?
Any final questions? Okay, all in
Thank you.
favor of approving the policy?
Aye.
6-0. Thank you.
We'll get posted and official.
Excellent. Any previews on what's next for policy subcommittee? What's coming down the pike? Come on.
We've got, I think our next meeting is, I think we're meeting next week, and we've got a couple policies on deck, so you'll be seeing more from us soon. Stay tuned.
Thank you. That brings us to the personnel update, which is in the packet. I don't think, is there anything to discuss on that?
No,
So,
except the amount of people who are shifting one way or another has lessened quite a bit since September, thankfully,
Yep.
so this is
Noticed
much
that.
more typical for this time of year.
good stuff. Thank you so much. That's the end of my agenda.
That's
All right.
Unless
Great.
anybody has anything else, I'll
I-
entertain.
I do have something.
Oh.
A motion to adjourn.
Oh, that's something.
A second.
All in favor of adjourning?
Oh.
Great.